Welcome everyone to lecture 5 of our course, Behavior Economics. And this lecture is about choice architecture and nudge theory. So in choice architecture, assume that you are the director of food services at a large school system. So you're basically in charge of hundreds of kids, thousands of kids, and many cafeterias. So the question is, how would you go and display the food so it makes people better off? Okay, so then the experiment is you want to try to see what works, what doesn't, how people respond to incentives and nudges. So you could try different varieties of experimentations. Like desserts, you can place them first, another last. You can put the burgers on the separate line, French fries, and so on. First of all, before you go much into this, you got to think about who you're dealing with, right? Your target audience. This is cafeteria, a bunch of kids of different ages storm in the cafeteria at lunchtime trying to get something to eat. And they are hungry, so the state of mind is hungry. That's hungriness, hungry being hunger being system one kind of emotion, right? So I need to eat to survive. Okay, so with that in mind, let's experiment. So in some schools, desserts were placed first, in others last, in others on a separate line. French fries on the eye level, carrots sticks at eye level, carrot sticks later on. The question that you're not denying anyone the choice to eat whatever they want, but you are trying to nudge them and influence them to eat. And at this moment, not to eat healthier, but to measure the response of it. So the results were interesting when they did this experiment. This is part of, by the way, this is part of a book called Nudge by Richard Taylor and Cass Sunstein. And simply by rearranging the cafeteria, the response was that the consumption of certain food items increased by as much as 25%. So that is very impressive. It's a huge result, 25% of any item just by rearranging it and placing it in different places. So the conclusion of this experiment was that school children, just like adults, can be greatly influenced by small change in the context. And this influence can be exercised for better or for worse. We call them nudge when we influence for the better, and the new term that is being coined lately is sludge for influencing for worse. But you have to understand that we're using our powers for good and not for bad. So I remember my professor Taylor signing his books Nudge for Good, and to this day he does the same thing, Nudge for Good, because it's very easy to influence for bad as well. All right, so two things. Our choices are influenced by the context where they're placed, and children and adults alike are also influenced by these choices, by small changes. So great influence, great power over what kids eat. So how do we deal with this, right? So if you were in such position, and by the way, you are every day when trying to influence other people's choices or other people's decisions, you're doing the same thing. So what will be your goals if you are the director of food services for a large school system, right? So, some suggestions that we can throw in, and they're like arrange the food to make the student best off, all things considered, right? Choose the food order at random. Try to arrange the food to get the kids to pick the same foods they would choose on their own, right? Maximize the sales of the items from the suppliers that are willing to offer you the largest bribes. And maximize profits, period, because at the end of the day, the cafeteria and the school is still a business, right? And they need to make profits. So there are some suggestions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might have others, throw them in if you think of. So, okay, but let's get them one by one. Arrange the food to make the student best off, all things considered. That means that I have to intervene and dictate what people would eat. right? What kids would eat. So that's a bit intrusive, and we're kind of preserving free will without forcing people to do whatever we want them to do, but rather influence them to take their decision on their own. So this is a bit intrusive. Choose the food order at random. This sounds neutral, okay, but it's not, because some kids at some school will have less healthy diets than other kids at other school because of the randomness of the arrangement. Try to arrange the food to get the kids to pick the same foods they would choose on their own. This is kind of like a circle, kind of catch-22, because the experiments show that kids are influenced by the choices, so therefore they're gonna pick whatever we put in front of them. So it doesn't really work. Maximize the size of items from the suppliers that are willing to offer you the largest bribes. We're gonna skip this for now. And maximize profits, period. Only if the cafeteria makes the most money, but it is worth it if it makes the kids less healthy, right? So you can put the burgers, they give you the highest profit first, but that kind of doesn't work, doesn't help you making the kids better off. So what is it, right? And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer. If you're faced with certain type of influence, you are responsible for it. So you pick one of the five, right? Or other suggestion that you might have. You can alternate days, you can alternate weeks, you can do other choices, other suggestions. But the point of this is that if you are influencing the environment where these choices are being made, you are what they call a choice architect. So you architect the choices that people will follow, and therefore they're influenced by it. And this happens every day. You're trying to get your friends to go out to lunch, and you're trying to pick a restaurant that you like, Italian, Chinese, whatever, and you're presenting the choices in front of them, so they would trying to influence them to pick whatever you want. In context of business, any kind of context, any kind of environment where people make decisions can be influenced, can be constructed in a way that influences people. Therefore, you are a choice architect. Most of us are, without realizing it. We don't call it like that. If you design the ballot voters use to choose the candidates, you're a choice architect. If you're a doctor and you describe alternative treatments, you're a choice architect. If you're a parent trying to figure out the educational options for your kid, you're a choice architect, and so on. If you design the DMV forms for organ donation, by the way, if you remember from lecture 1, you are a choice architect. So choice architecture is, we have many parallels between choice architecture, the way we structure choices, and the more traditional forms of architecture, like designing a building. There is one important thing. There's no such thing as a neutral design, right? There's no, even a random design is a design. Even if a random choice architecture is still influencing people that are using it. If you design a building, whatever you design it, it will influence the people that are using it, right? There are no arbitrary decisions. Everything matters, right? The way you place the bathrooms. So, which is seemingly small decision, but has subtle influences of how people use the building, interact. So every trip to the bathroom creates an opportunity to run into colleagues, for better or for worse. You might want to design it that way, you might not. The point is that there's no random design. Any design will have some influences. The point is that you want to make a design that incorporates all the biases that we discuss, so you make it better off. You make people that are using it better off. When you design a product, when you design an interface, a website, a product interface online, you are influencing the users for better or for worse. So applying behavioral sciences, behavioral economics principles into design of websites, of interfaces, of environments in general, of rooms, like designers, right? You are influencing people to take certain actions and discourage them to taking other actions. So good building is not merely attractive, but it also works. So important part, small and apparently insignificant details can have major impacts on people's behavior. A good rule of thumb is to assume that everything matters. And I want you to Google this, the urinals at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. They have a little fly on the urinals, so it helps people aiming better, so there's no spillage, and therefore there's less effort to clean the bathroom and better profits. So this is how it goes. We start from a urinal and we ended up to better profits. I want you to, this is an old example. I've seen it in many other bathrooms since, and it still works. It's still an interesting nudge. So everything matters. This is what you need to assume as a good rule of thumb, good heuristic to have, that everything matters. Excellent. We call this libertarian paternalism. Well, not we, Richard Taylor and Cass Sunstein called this framework libertarian paternalism. That means we're trying to influence how people make decisions for their own good, but without telling them to do so explicitly. We suggest, we infer, we nudge. Oh, by the way, a little bit of anecdote. The book, which is now very famous, called Nudge, the authors wanted to call it libertarian paternalism. So in that case, maybe they would have sold 10 copies of it. Luckily, an editor suggested the title Nudge, and it went to be very, very famous and popular book to read these days. So it tells you that, just like in rebate and bonus conversation we had, words matter, right? And obviously, it helped Richard Taylor getting his Nobel Prize in 2017. Okay, so let's move on. Libertarian means people should be free to do what they like and to opt out of undesirable arrangements if they want to do so. This is from their book. And paternalism is you are welcome to influence people's behavior in order to make them better off. So not gun to the head kind of situation. You don't want to force people to do what you want them to do. Their decision should be still theirs. However, we're trying to nudge them and influence them to show them better choices and lead to better decisions. If people want to smoke cigarettes, eat a lot of candy, choose an unsuitable healthcare plan, or fail to save for retirement, well, they should be able to do so. However, a good behavioral scientist will help them make better decisions for themselves. Choice architects make self-conscious attempts to move people in the direction that will make their lives better. They nudge. We nudge. Okay? A nudge is a little soft shove, push in the right direction, if you will. And they help. Nudges help. We will continue on with this discussion about nudges, and you'll see they're very, very potent and powerful. Why they help? Well, humans make predictable, systematic, and predictable errors when making decisions. If you remember the status quo bias, the inertia, the default option that you find it very often to choosing a new cell phone. When you got your new cell phone, you're learning how to fix it and how to use it and everything. And one thing that you don't necessarily change is the ringtone. So most of you probably have still hold on to the ringtone that the phone came with, which is the default option. It's good enough. You don't need to, there's no reason to put effort to change the ringtone, and it's good enough for you, and that's the default option, or the status quo bias, or inertia. We call them in many ways. Two conclusions from this default research: never underestimate the power of inertia. So the way you set up the defaults, if they're easy enough, people will follow. And because it saves them a lot of time and energy and cost. So never underestimate the power of inertia. People don't like they don't like change, not because they don't necessarily like it per se, but they're afraid to invest energy in certain things that do not bring them benefits. And that power of default can be harnessed, right? So we can actually design things where the default option is the easiest one, and that will move people along and influence them. Many people who favor freedom of choice reject any kind of paternalism. They don't want to be told what to do. They want the government to let citizens to choose for themselves and just give them as many choices as possible. Is that a good idea, giving people too many choices? The false assumption is that almost all people, almost all the time, make choices that are in their best interest and, at the very least, are better than the choices that would have been made by someone else, which is a fallacy. Okay. And back to the idea that people like as many choices as possible. It is true that we like them. It's not as true that we actually act on them. There was a famous example, a famous study where two people, they went to a grocery store and they placed jars of marmalade in one aisle, 6 of them, and 24 in a different aisle. And then they wanted to see if many choices would help people along and they'd make a better decision. So what they found is that yes, more people stopped by the display with 24 jars. So we do like more choices, many choices, but fewer people actually bought from this aisle. On the 6 jars of marmalade aisle, fewer people stopped by, but more of them bought. Okay, faced with smaller set of choices, we are most likely to act on them and interact. A lot of choices, we like them, but they are kind of paralyzing our decision making. All right. So suppose that a novice plays chess against an experienced player. Predictably, the novice will lose precisely because he made inferior choices, right? So in a fight between an experienced and unexperienced players in chess, you would correctly predict that the novice will make inferior choices. And in certain areas, in many areas actually, we are novices. We are interacting in a world that is inhabited by experienced professionals trying to sell our things. Right? If you go to a mortgage to get a new mortgage, what do you know about mortgages? You got to learn about them. You got to study them. You got to go and research. And you go up against someone who's been doing this all their lives, and they know all the tricks in the book, right? So you obviously, if you would go on your own, you would obviously make mistakes and have you have inferior choices than someone who knows what they're doing. So that's the idea of asymmetric information between the agents. But it could be reasonable to expect that people will make good choices in context where they have experience, they have good information, and feedback, prompt feedback. Like choosing among ice cream flavors. You know exactly which one you like. You take a lick, and then you know exactly how it works for you, right? If you like it or not, and move on. So you got experience with it because you've been sampling so many ice creams. You have good information, and then you got feedback because you know if you like it right away or not. That is not the same thing if you're in a context where you're inexperienced or poorly informed, or there's no feedback, or very slow. Like if you were to choose between fruit and ice cream, the long-term effects are slow and the feedback is poor. You don't know what's happening. I mean, you understand that fruit is better than ice cream for your long-term health, but there's no feedback. Eating a fruit, eating ice cream, you don't get any kind of feedback from your body. You don't feel bad or ill or sick if you eat ice cream, which is supposed to do so over long term, eating ice cream. So if you don't have any feedback like that, obviously you can decide better. You know, System 2 tells you that fruit is better than ice cream, but System 1, if you remember, prefer ice cream anytime. Choosing between medical treatments, investment options, same exact idea. If I don't choosing investments or medical treatments, what kind of feedback I have? Only what the doctor is telling me, and I'm subject to be influenced. The doctor is still a choice architect in this case, or whatever friends are telling me, same idea. I don't have direct experience if the feedback is slow or doesn't come often. So nudges can help in this situation, in situation where 1, we're inexperienced, 2, we're poorly informed, 3, the feedback is slow and infrequent. All right, so 2 misconceptions. It is possible to avoid influencing people. Nope, not true. Even if you don't do anything, that is still a response, still a choice, still a response that still influences your people around you. Paternalism involves coercion. Not true. In the cafeteria example, the order in which food was presented does not force a particular diet on anyone. So you don't have to, just because you tell people, it doesn't mean you're forcing them. So that's the causality effect here. All right, let's look back now at some biases and blunders that we looked before and see how this influences the way they were arranged. So remember this, the tables of Shepard, remember this and that, right? So the way things are presented, are choiced, like if you look at the circles, the orange circle is one presented around bigger circles, and the other choice is same circle presented with smaller circles. So it clearly influences our way of saying things and thinking. System 1 and System 2, our good friends from Lecture 1, are back here. We call them gut reaction and conscious thought. We call them any way we can, but System 1 and System 2 are the most official names, as you know, automatic versus reflective and so on. So the automatic system will tell you the plane is shaking, I'm going to die when you travel, right? This is it. It's a cohesive story. It is triggered by some kind of emotional response. And System 2 says actually planes are very safe. The probability of dying from a plane crash is very, very small. You're much more likely to die from a hot dog or, vending machines. So, and this is very, very interesting because even though you are logically thinking that you're not going to die from a plane crash because the chances are so minimal, you are still fearing this because it's so vivid and it's so powerful, creates an image, a story that is really powerful. Same thing if you swim in the ocean and being attacked by a shark. The chances of dying from a shark attack are very, very small. You are more likely to be hit by lightning twice in the same place during the day, but people believe that is actually not true. Okay, so the automatic system starts out with no idea how to play tennis or golf. Countless hours of practice might train the automatic system to just do it or trust your gut. So System 2 is the one that teaches you, the one that starts teaching, the one that's the learning part, right? When you're first starting to drive, when you're a teenager, driving a car implied many, many things on the checklist, right? Like check your mirror, turn your signal, put your seat belt, turn off your car, and so on. Now, when you're thinking about driving a car, you don't think about the sequence. Your System 2 was able to train System 1 to become, so driving becomes more like an automatic reaction rather than a learned skill. All right, here are our friends again. In case you remember, you forgot about them. So our friends, you already know them, right? And the rule of thumbs. And so rule of thumbs are important because it saved us a lot of time and they work most of the time. Another rule of thumb for writing effectively is like use simple language, be consistent, be precise, and so on. You can find this all over there. All the self-help books are based on rule of thumbs to help you guide you through life. And some biases that we talked were anchoring, availability, representativeness, events by chance, overconfidence, gains and losses, which you also call loss aversion, status quo bias, and framing. These are super, super strong biases that could help you design choices, design environments where you can nudge people to be better off, right? So you can use all these biases, all these tools that you have at your disposal to design choices, environments that are influencing people to do the right thing. Now, I want to mention one thing here. You can use any of these biases individually, but they're much more effective if they're piled them together. If you add them on top of each other, create multiple layers of choice architecture, and then use those to create a great environment. Taken individually, and this is an important point that I want to stress out because I see a lot of reviews. Taken individually, these nudges are silent. They're not very strong. They could be weak, right? It depends on the environment. You can't just take one instrument and use it. For a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, if you remember the saying. You want to pile them up. You want to construct a layer-based choice architecture that will help people be influenced in the right way. So use all this. These are just a few in the list of biases, but they're most strong and the strongest and the best designed to use when you construct a choice architecture. So what is the point, right? So this is a picture of Lakeshore Drive, by the way, going up northbound on Lakeshore Drive. There's a curve that is kind of steep. It's almost 90 degrees around Drake Hotel, and there is a sign that says 25 miles an hour, but people don't see it necessarily, right? So how do we design a way of people slowing down without forcing them to? So the way this came about is they design lines that are getting closer and faster as you approach the curve, and that will seem that the lines are coming at you faster, which will make you subconsciously apply the brakes, right? So this is the actual picture of the Lakeshore Drive, and that is you have been nudged, right? And it works because people will automatically slow down seeing these lines coming at them faster. Like anything else, if you're used to it, if your system one is trained to not see them or ignore them, they don't work. Nudges don't work if they're ignored or you don't see them, you don't pay attention to them. There are social nudges that we have, and they're very powerful. They comes from social proof, actually, from the social proof where we say that any behavior that is done by people similar to us is okay in certain situations. So, for example, teenage girls who see other teenagers having children and are more likely to become pregnant themselves. Obesity is contagious. If your best friends get fat, your risk of gaining weight goes up because you see yourself as part of the group, part of the social group where people get fat, and then you don't see anything wrong with that, which is in the normal course of action will be for you to get fat as well. Broadcasters mimic one another, producing otherwise inexplicable fads like reality TV, American Idol game shows, and so on, and usually at the same time. Well, one is competition, obviously, but also is because everybody does it. If everybody does it, then it must be okay for me to do it as well. Random assignment of your first-year college roommate has big influences for their grades and hence on their future prospect. So this is interesting, and it also applies a little bit to choosing your spouse, because random assignment of your first college, which is a random thing, it's a random choice architecture, right? Still random, still a choice architecture. and it has influence. If you have a good roommate, your grades will be better. If you have a bad roommate, your grades will suffer, right? Same thing with dating in a way, right? It's important who you choose to be your spouse because all your life will be influenced by that choice. Choosing a college for that matter. Bottom line, humans are easily nudged by other humans. Why? Because we like to conform, we like to belong, we like to be part of social groups where we are seen doing the same similar things, right? So we are all trying to mimic each other because that's where the safety comes from. And remember, the, we were trained to be part of socials. If you're left alone, back in the memorial, in the Ice Age or earlier, if you're out of the group, you will likely die. So your brain is trained to be part of social groups. Doing what others do, um, it's much more effective to try to convince people to do like other people do. So I'll give you an example. The petrified forest in Arizona, I believe, people would take petrified wood from the petrified forest as a souvenir. And they wanted to do something about it, and they put a sign, please, if we catch you that you are stealing petrified wood, we will fine you. Now, when you see this fines thing, like in this case, don't mess with Texas, $10 to $1,000 fine for littering. When you see these financial sanctions, it becomes a game of cat and a mouse. If you don't catch me, then I'm good. If you catch me, then you can fine me, right? So it's no longer a motivation for me to not take wood, petrified wood from the petrified forest. It becomes a game of if you catch me, then yes. If you don't catch me, then I'm good, right? So different behaviors, different changes in behaviors. So that doesn't work usually. So they changed the sign in the petrified forest, and they said many people take wood from the petrified forest, thus leaving it poor and in a worse shape. This is also a problem. This actually, if you think about it, it actually reinforces bad behavior. When you say, don't do such thing because other people have done it, based on this social interaction, then if other people have done it, then it's okay for me to do it too. If other people took petrified wood from the petrified forest, then it's okay for me to do it too. I know it's wrong, but if other did it, it's okay for me to do it as well. So that doesn't work. That actually reinforces a bad behavior, and you have to be careful when you construct choice architecture like this, so you don't reinforce bad behavior. You don't say, oh, don't do this because other people have done it and it's wrong. No. So what they did in the petrified wood, in the petrified forest, they put a sign that says, many people, most of the people, leave the forest as they found it, unchanged, right? And that worked. Because now I see myself as other people and who left the forest untouched, and I do the same. So this is very powerful when we're trying to influence the good behavior rather than the bad behavior, right? So they changed this "don't mess with Texas" thing from the right one where it said the fine to the left one, and it's much more powerful without the financial incentives. Another effect that comes from choice architecture is that we tend to conform because we think that everybody's paying attention to us. All right, and we're trying to be careful what we say, what we wear, how we look, because we think that a lot of people are paying attention to us. In reality, yes, people are paying attention to us, but not in the percentage that you think they're paying attention to us. It's about half of what you think. So I've done this experiment myself. For example, I wore the same shirt at work 2 days in a row, right? Same shirt, same colleagues and everything. And I asked them, what shirt which shirt did I wear yesterday? None of them were able to tell me which shirt I wore yesterday, or very, very few. Many fewer than the one that I expect, right? So you can try this yourself, obviously. Do not assume that everybody's paying attention to you. If you have a bad hair day, let it go. Not as many people pay attention to you, to your, okay? So the spotlight effect is very strong in us because we're the center of attention for ourselves, and we also tend to extend that like a halo effect in a way, and we think that everybody's paying attention to us as much as we do, and that's not true. All right, when do we need a nudge? So when we talked about why we need a nudge, because we don't have experience, we don't have feedback, and we need to get those. But I want you to remember that choice architecture and its effects cannot be avoided. Okay, so either you do it consciously or subconsciously, it's still a choice architecture, it's still a design, and it will influence your users. So the short answer is like, when do we need a nudge, is when they're most likely to help and least likely to inflict harm. So we're nudging for good. The long answer is people need nudges when decisions are rare. They don't happen often and difficult. We don't know how to answer, and we replace the question with the easier one. For decisions that we don't get prompt feedback, like eating fruit versus ice cream. And when we have trouble translating the situation, we don't understand exactly what is happening in the situation. One example, very powerful, is benefits now, cost later. Guess why I like the ice cream? Because it gives me all the benefits now. It's cool, it refreshes me, it's delicious, and so on. What are the costs? I'm going to gain some weight. But because I don't see those costs immediate, I don't have immediate feedback, I don't see them. So they're, in my mind, inexistent. And self-control is where this is happening, because self-control is a system 2 action, is a conscious action of system 2. And if we are testing our capacity of self-control, we might run into problem, because system 1 is very strong. Remember, we use system 1 to make most of our decision. So when we have the benefits now, cost later, I have a hard time controlling myself, right? So I want the ice cream and I don't see the cost. It's a small ice cream and I don't see the cost, and then I see why not. The benefits there are now, I can get instant gratification and I don't care about the cost. Everything that's good for us, exercise, flossing, dieting, the costs are due immediately. So I have to put the work in. I got to put the effort in to exercise, diet, and everything. But the benefits are not there immediately. I might feel great about myself, but if I exercise every day, these are long-term benefits. I exercise so I can get a good health throughout my late ages. And so because of this, I tend to do a little. I don't see the benefits, so I do little of it, right? But on the other hand, the sinful goods, smoking, alcohol, and chocolate, they give me benefits now. We get the pleasure now, and we pay later, right? So this is where we can use nudges to help people out when they try to exercise or quit smoking and everything. Another time when we need nudges is when things are hard. Okay, they're difficult. We know how to deal with simple things that, tie your shoes, spell simple words. We have problems when we are coping with harder problems. Okay. So as we encounter harder and harder problems, we need some help. Most likely we'll need help picking the right mortgage for our house than buying the right bread, because we're buying bread every day almost, but we don't necessarily pick the right mortgage every day. Frequency. Well, even harder problems become easier with practice. The more you practice, the better you become. It's a known truth, only if you get to practice. Some of the life's most important decisions do not come with many opportunities to do over. So if you think about the biggest decision of your life, you didn't get the chance to do them again and again. College, you choose a college only once. You marry probably not more than 2 or 3 times. So you get some do-overs, but not enough. You may only have one career, although that might change still. You may buy one or two or more houses in your lifetime. Same, in your lifetime you buy, but you have very few chances to practice. The higher the stakes, generally, the fewer chances to practice, and this is where we need nudges. When we don't get enough feedback, practice makes it perfect, but only when people get opportunities for feedback, so they can learn. And learning is most effective if I get immediate feedback after each try, like when we putt in golf. When we get ice cream, we know exactly how it is. When we putt in golf, we try again and again and again until we learn, and we tweak our shots to get better at it. So life situations are not all suitable to provide good feedback. We need feedback for the choices we select, not the one we reject. Right? So you only get feedback on the one that you select. The one that you reject, you don't know. So you're not learning from failures, the point is, much. Oh, and this is a good point to talk about why we're not learning from failures. Failures are losses, and we tend to don't like them, and we tend to not visit them again. Although we do learn from them every once in a while. So you got to experiment and try new alternatives, like taking a new route on your way home and try different ways of getting there. If you go the same route every night, then obviously you're not learning anything. Long-term processes rarely provide good feedback. Someone can eat a high-fat diet for years without having any warning signs until the heart attack, which is too late. And this is the benefit versus cost later. When feedback doesn't work, we may benefit from a nudge. All right, so when we had chances and time to sample the alternatives, we're comfortable with our choices. We know that we prefer coffee ice cream to vanilla. We know that we prefer one style of music over another. We know what we like when we read. And let's suppose that you're traveling to a foreign country and you need to eat. How would you go about it? Right? And this is very interesting because you know the answers to this. The answers are that you do what other people do, right? So not knowing, you are going to mimic other people. You're trying to find their group and mimic other people, right? And this is hard for people who make good decisions when they have trouble translating choices in terms that make sense. So if I don't know what capital appreciation and dynamic dividend is, that means nothing to me, then I cannot make a good decision, especially if I don't have feedback, if I don't get some kind of expertise in it. And same with health plans. Health plans, when you have to choose your health plan, it's a terrible experience at this moment because you don't know how to choose, you don't know what's good. It really takes a lot of effort to choose the right health plan, and you don't even know if you got the right one or not. In conclusion, when you design something and you do it every day, a set of choices. You're a choice architect. And there's no such thing as random design, random choice architecture. Any kind of design will influence users, but it may be in ways that you don't want to. So you would rather apply some behavioral science principles, behavior economics principles to your choice architecture, so at least you can guide the user towards the action that you want them to take. So this is why this is so important. And you do that, you recognize that when people don't have feedback, when people are having hard time understanding the long-term cost of their benefits now, they don't have the expertise, the choices they make are less frequent. This is where you have to design ways that you can guide these people towards the right choice. All right, well, thank you so much for your audience today, and I'll see you in the next lecture.